And it's a very good morning to the Gelding on not Caulfield race day, Gelding, as we both thought last week, but the powers that be have surprised us again. We're travelling to Cranbourne for a, in inverted commas, provincial meeting with a 10-race card, the first at 12:10 p.m. What are your thoughts about provincial racing so soon after the Spring Carnival's concluded, Gelding?
Good morning, Professor. Good morning, listeners. Is that a loaded question you're asking me, Professor?
It's very loaded, Gelding.
Do you know the answer?
Yes, I do know the answer. It's ridiculous. It's a travesty.
Provincial meetings, they seem to come about this time of year when Cranbourne and Ballarat and Mornington all want Saturday meetings. Cranbourne Cup's a very good race. I do believe that these races certainly do have a place on the calendar. But I remember most of the big country cups, Professor, used to be on Wednesdays or Sundays, going back not too far.
No, now, that's not too far ago at all, Gelding.
I would have thought a nice Cranbourne Cup worth 500,000. And Professor, this isn't a list. This isn't a group race. This is a listed race, right? So fantastic on a Sunday. Cranbourne now a big training centre. Would have been fantastic. Not far from the city. Just would have been ideal, Professor. But anyway, that is the powers to be have changed it. And I will lament and get on the soapbox, Professor. What happened to Sandown Cup Day? The Zipping Classic, the Sandown Guineas, Sandown Cup, they were group races. It was at the end of the racing carnival, Professor, the Spring Carnival. It was a day where people could go out to the lawns, the vast lawns down at Sandown, have a picnic. Kids could run around on the grass. Group racing, not listed racing, but group racing. Anyway, Professor, I'll get off the soapbox. This has its place. I don't think today's the day, and they should have converted back and had what was traditionally the Sandown meeting today.
Well, there's one answer to it, isn't there, Gelding? And you've taught me this. When we ask a question like that, we just look at it and say, well, that's racing.
Yeah, that's racing. And, you keep asking, where's the logic behind it? And I just say, well, they're race committees, Professor. Yes, these people get involved that racing's not their core business. Well, that's another thing, when a racing club's going to go back to their core business of racing.
Well, it'll be a welcome return, Gelding. All right, well, as you said, the feature race is race 9, the Cranbourne Cup, over 1,600 metres, listed race. Now, Gelding, a question without notice, and if you don't know the answer, that's okay. Is this the shortest cup in Victoria, 1,600 metres? Doesn't a cup race have to be over 2,000 to qualify?
Don't, Professor. You make me laugh. You do make me laugh. Is it the shortest cup? No.
Oh.
Is it one of the shortest cups worth so much money? Yes. A lot of not the provincial clubs, but the country clubs, like the Ararat Cup, the Avoca Cup, all these country cups are round about the mile because, of course, we don't train many stayers and things like that. Like here we are, Professor, in the main race, a $500,000 race over a mile, and we get 11 horses. Does it tell you there's too many races over a mile over the Spring Carnival? Worth a little bit more?
Don't start talking sense, Gelding.
Yeah, so look, it's a very open Cranbourne Cup, a listed race. A lot of the horses you would like to own, Professor. I will certainly give that. The field is not a bad field, but look, to me, wrong time, wrong place, wrong distance, as you said. Cranbourne Cup, yeah. Anyway, I would have thought 2,000 would have been more appropriate for the main race of a race club.
Well, Gelding, I haven't been involved in racing as long as you have, but when I was writing that down today, 1,600 metres did make me pause slightly and think, oh, well, that's a pretty short distance for a cup race. Anyway, let's move on. Yeah. Track's a soft 5, Gelding. Punters should take notice of how the weather is this afternoon because there's been a fair bit of rain down that way, and that track rating could be downgraded if there's any more rain.
Well, Professor, at the start of the week, we hadn't had rain for a while, so you would imagine they'd have to pour a bit of water in. I don't know, Professor, where you are, but where I am yesterday, there was a constant type of rain in patches, very heavy. Looking at the forecast for today, again, humid with rain anticipated. In fact, in some of the bulletins, Professor, they're predicting thunderstorms late in the afternoon. Well, so we would say to listeners to just have a look at the state of the track. When I was doing my tips today, Professor, I was looking for horses that had a W next to their name. So I'm expecting a bit of rain. So I will put that proviso on my tips that I'm looking for horses that may have some wet weather track form, as I anticipate we'll get a bit of rain today.
Gelding, was that W for wet or W for win or both?
Both. No, Professor. W for the wet, but hopefully they're winners today.
All right, Gelding.
You're on fire today, Professor.
Oh, well, yeah. Yes, Gelding.
Have you been locked up at home by yourself or something?
Must have been, Gelding. Just must have been. All right, the rail's out 3 metres, Gelding. So without further ado, why don't you tell the viewers your 2 best bets for Cranbourne today?
Professor, going to Cranbourne, I'm going later in the day in race 7, the Leicester, the race named in honour of Dean Lester, the race tipster and jockey manager. Race 7, he had his base down at Cranbourne, was very close to Robbie Griffith's stable, very close to some of the jockeys. Jai McNeil, who rode Twilight Payment to win a Melbourne Cup, to lead all the way. Allegedly, it's been reported that was the plan of Dean Lester that he gave to Lloyd Williams to win. So Dean Lester was very well regarded in the racing industry, an expert in true sense. Unfortunately, passed away early in the year with cancer. So Cranbourne, very nice of the Cranbourne Racing Club to name a race after him. And look, I think Jai McNeil, who was Dean Lester was his manager, can win the race. On one of our old favourites, Professor, we've been on before, Gregor Limo, race 7, number 1. Gregor Limo, this horse trained by Mike Moroney, has been very consistent, Professor. Just beaten at Flemington last start when it ran second during the carnival. And then in a Group 3 2,000-metre race at Caulfield, ran third on the Wednesday. Professor, that was our tip that day, was only just beaten. So I think Gregor Limo can go well today. Carrying 61, a lot of weight. I think Jai McNeil would be very keen to win this race. Mike Moroney, a very, very good judge. This horse has been very consistent. Its last 3 starts since a spell, Professor, 2, 3 and 2 in group races, and drops back today to a benchmark 84. So certainly up in weight, but hopefully, and it has won in the wet, Professor. So I'm hoping that race 7, number 1, will get me off to a very, very good start today. Professor, we then move on to the Cranbourne Cup. We always have to have a bet in the main race, so we think that's appropriate. I think later in your tips, Professor, you will have the bet of the day and one I like. So I look for one in the what I think's a very, very open Cranbourne Cup. So there's 3 or 4 winning chances, Professor. I'm going probably one for the Giraffe, Professor. Now that Foxy Freed is going to be retired to stud, I thought one for the Giraffe from the Foxy stable, Professor. We'll go Foxy Cleopatra.
Oh,
So race 9, number 9, Foxy Cleopatra for the Giraffe. This horse is to be ridden by Craig Williams, who's had pretty much a quiet time during the Spring Carnival, Professor. Rode several placings, so he may be looking for a big win. Trained by Trent Busselton and Natalie Young down at Cranbourne, the partnership down there. They've been in very, very good form. The training partnership. Foxy Cleopatra ran during the Carnival, Professor, and was a very, very impressive second first up when it flashed home to be just beaten by half a neck at Flemington in the Mares Group 3 race, dropping to listed class 54. Craig Williams. It's only had 5 starts, Professor, for 1 win, 2 seconds and a third. That win was over the today's distance of a mile, Professor, 1,600. So at $5, I think Foxy Cleopatra can be a good each-way bet. So my 2 tips, Professor, are race 7, number 1, Gregor Limo, and race 9, number 9, Foxy Cleopatra. And you like, Professor?
yeah, Gelding, going a little bit early on my first tip and a little bit later on my second tip. But we probably agree one thing. We want Craig Williams to have a very good day at Cranbourne today.
Yes, we don't want to be willowed, Professor.
No, we do not want to be willowed today. All right, first tip, Gelding, race 5, the Hallam Truck Centre Handicap. It's a benchmark 70 for 3-year-old horses and above, over 1,000 metres. I like in this one, Gelding, horse number 13, Pink Bow Tie, and spelled a little bit differently, B-E-A-U for the bow and T-Y for the tie. So Pink Bow Tie, not Pink Beauty.
Very good. Don't forget that space, Professor.
Yeah, exactly right, Gelding. So coming out of barrier 8, Gelding, it's had 10 starts for 2 wins and 2 placings. So a 20% win rate, a 40% place rate. Over its last 5 starts, it's been in excellent form, Gelding. It's had 2 wins and 2 seconds, including a win at Schuker over the same distance last month. It's won on pace and it's won back in the field. So, Gelding, I did look at that today because it's a little bit hard to judge how the track will be and what sort of bias it'll have. So by race 5, hopefully Craig Williams will have worked out which way the track's running so that he can either have the horse forward if it needs to be or ease the horse back a little bit if that's where it needs to be. Beautiful,
Professor. Now, can I do what you do to us at Sportsfan Radio sometimes? A question without notice?
Yes, you can, Gelding. And you know the good part about questions without notice that I get? I usually can't answer them.
Well, Professor, from your neck of the woods down at the Pakenham Training Centre, where you do have a horse with Peter Moody and you have been known to have coffee with Phil Stokes down that way or hot chocolates with Phil.
I was in the same room as him, Gelding. I think that's probably more correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about Pink Bow Tie's trainer?
Brian McGrath.
Yeah, out of Pakenham.
Out of Pakenham, yes. Over the career, he's had a 9% win rate, which is not all that great. Over his last 56%. Can you tell me a little bit more, Gelding?
No, not at all, Professor. That's why that's why I thought I might have got you on a question without notice.
Well, at least I knew a little bit of information about him, Gelding.
Oh, you had us. You're right and touched around in that neck of the woods, Professor.
And I was going to say I've gone for the local trainer. So
yes.
Now, Gelding, one thing I will say, it's about $5 the field here, and Pink Bow Tie's at $5.50. So there's plenty of chances in this field. Pink Bow Tie currently showing $2 the place. So great each way odds for punters.
Okay, Professor. Just a bit worried about if the rain comes. With it hasn't shown any soft or heavy form, but look, if the rain doesn't, as you said, on a good track, which the track currently is, Professor, it's had 2 wins in a second. So I do like it, as you said. The each way value is just superb.
And my second selection, Gelding, is in race 10, the last race on the card, the Freeway Forward Shooting Stars, a Class 3 race with set weights and penalties over 1,500 metres. Gelding, you and I both like in this race horse number 5, Jimmy's Star, coming out of barrier 8. It's had 4 starts for 3 wins and a placing. So 75% win rate, which is excellent. 100% place rate, which is great for punters. It came over from New Zealand in September. It's being trained now by Mara and Eustace in Australia. Hasn't put a foot wrong so far, Gelding. It's up in class, but it should go well. Craig Williams in the saddle again. And the Mara Eustace combination, we all know how good they're going at the moment with training. Currently fixed, showing $2.30 and $1.28, Gelding. It might start a little bit longer than that, but not too much longer.
Professor, I like it. As we said off air, I think it's a bet of the day. Mar Eustace, they win everything. As I said, Willow's due. Horses come over. The Mar Eustace stable and the Aussie Kerr syndicate, the races in the Aussie Kerr colours. They've obviously picked this one out of New Zealand. They seem to do very well. As I said, Mar Eustace seems to improve horses. This horse had fantastic form in New Zealand. Come here, won its first start at Bendigo under difficult conditions. It got back and was on the inside and weaved through for a good win. So, that was, with it being Hampton, it still was able to get out of trouble, Professor. So, which is always a good sign because, being in some horses, some that we've had, if they've struck a bit of trouble, Professor, that's the end of their chance.
Exactly right, Gelding.
When a horse can overcome trouble and still win, they're the horses you want to be backing. So, Professor, I think this is a fantastic tip by you, and rightly so should be our bet of the day.
All right, Gelding, my two, just recapping, race 5, horse 13, Pink Bow Tie, and race 10, horse 5, Jimmy's Star. Now, we can go to the Professor's Parlay, and we can once again call it, Gelding, the very, 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 very successful Professor's Parlay.
Professor, it is absolutely fantastic. And please be modest and all that as you will, but you're running at the Professor's Parlay over 60%, right? So basically 2/3 of the Professor's Parlays you're winning on. Not collecting, these are wins. And any racing tipping service that is going over 40% for just backing horses to win would be writing themselves up, patting on the back, saying how fantastic they are, and people would be flocking to them. You are going over 60%, not only with picking of a horse, but then following it. Like if you're 60% just on the horse, Professor, that is fantastic. But to then follow it up with 2 other sporting events, it is just absolutely fantastic. So you are to be commended, Professor.
Thanks, Gelding. Over the last 10 weeks, 68% success rate.
Unbelievable. Incredible.
So better than 2/3.
Building a new wing because of the Professor's Parlay?
Shortly, Gelding, shortly.
Shortly. Okay. You might have the wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly right, Gelding. All right. So last week we had She Dancers, which was placed, and the Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys were both successful. So the place parlay paid $7.50, Gelding, which is still a return. So we're very happy with that. Now, this week, the agreed bet of the day, race 5, horse 8, Jimmy's Star. And let's parlay that into a bit of a surprise for you today, Gelding.
I just query you on that? I've got it down as race 10, horse 5.
Yes, Gelding, you're right. I'm stupid. It's race 10, horse 5. I can't read my own writing. Jimmy's Star. How about that? Race 10.
How about that?
5.
Okay. Yep.
All right.
I just wanted to make sure the listeners got it right, Professor.
Exactly. And let's parlay that into a bit of a shock today, Gelding. I had a look at the NFL. Don't like any games there. Had a look at the Premier League. Don't like any games
Professor,
there. Yes.
I don't know what the parlay is. You said you had a surprise for me. Remember, look after me in the heart condition.
All right, Gelding, we're going to the NBA this afternoon.
The NBA?
The NBA, the National Basketball Association.
We haven't been there
since last year.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, Gelding. We're going for the Milwaukee Bucks to beat the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, like it.
The Bucks are second in the Eastern Conference. They've won 10 from 15. The Wizards having a terrible season. They've won 2 out of 14, Gelding, and I can't see them beating the Bucks, who are playing at home. The last time they played, which was only a few days ago, it was the Bucks 142 to the Wizards 129. The bookies, now you know how close basketball games usually are. The bookies are giving 11 and a half points in this game.
Well, that's a boring game.
Yeah, well, we hope it is boring, Gelding.
Yeah, we hope it is. Well, that's a big margin in basketball, Professor.
It is, Gelding. And we're going to parlay that into the Golden State Warriors playing at home to beat the San Antonio Clippers. The Golden State Warriors 11th. They've won 7 from 16. Playing at home should be too good for bottom of the table Western Conference team, the Spurs. They've only won 3 out of 15, Gelding. The bookies are giving 9.5 points in this match too, Gelding. The reason San Antonio Spurs aren't favoured is they're only averaging 109 points, which is a league worst, and that's both conferences, Gelding. So if you can't score more than 109 points or average more than 109 points in a game of basketball, Gelding, you're not going to go too well, especially when the Golden State Warriors are averaging way more than that when they score.
Yep. I like them, Professor. I do like them.
So the parlay today, Gelding, race 10, horse 5, Jimmy's Star, into the Milwaukee Bucks to beat the Washington Wizards, into the Golden State Warriors to beat the San Antonio Spurs. The win parlay showing 3-1, Gelding. The place parlay showing 3-2. Beautiful,
Professor. I like it.
All right, Gelding. Well, we've got Sportsfan Radio, the 495th edition of the show. We're getting very close to the 500 shows, Gelding, and you've been in most of them.
Fantastic, Professor. Unfortunately, missing Sunday.
Yes, you've got a prior commitment, Gelding, and that's understandable. Special guest tomorrow, Gelding. We've got a good one. SEN's Brett Phillips to talk about Australia's win in the semi-final of the Davis Cup. They're through to the final to play either, now let me see, I'll just do a little reconnoitre here, to play either Italy or Serbia.
Wow, Professor, that'll be big. SEN very much in the news these days. Professor.
What was that, Gelding?
SEN very much in the news these days for their owners. So,
well, Gelding, too bad you're not there, because you'd probably be the only one to ask Brett Phillips what was actually happening.
Well, I was going to say, is that a question for the judge or something? Just to say, it seems to be an interesting thing with the main company that owns SEN. It seems to be making the papers and seem to be in a little bit of.
Well, they had a sell-off of their assets in New Zealand during the week, Gelding.
Yes, the New Zealand TAB brought back the stations for a lot cheaper than what they sold them.
Well, yes. Amazing how the purchaser repurchases them, or the seller repurchases, isn't it?
Yes, very much the Packer deal, doesn't it? But yeah, very interesting, Professor.
All right, well, Gelding, and not only missing tomorrow's Sportsfan Radio, but you're on holidays for the next 2 Saturdays, so I'll be doing That's Racing by myself. So that'll be an interesting one. I've often been accused of talking to myself, so I'll be doing it again.
Oh, Professor, I'm sure. Look, you'll do a fine job. Yes, having a bit of a holiday just before Christmas, so been booked for a while, so we'll be jetting out of Australia for 2 weeks. So yeah, be a bit of fun.
Well, enjoy that, Gelding, and I'll look forward to your tips being semaphored through to me on the Friday before the show.
Very hard where I am, Professor. Very hard to get the form guides. Surprisingly enough.
I'll email it to you, Gelding.
We will try and do something there, Professor.
I'm sure we'll come up with something, Gelding.
Over the Pina Colada by the pool, Professor.
All right, Gelding. So on that note, until next Saturday, from That's Racing, it's good.